who could do the 100 in 10.8.
Yeah, he was a freak of nature though, and although he did start setting the trend of having these just massive players out in the backs and just running through players rather than just doing it on speed. Yeah. But that was when basically rugby players stopped looking like human beings, and it became like, right, you were the category above in terms of just simple size and athletic ability. Yeah. So anyway, we're live, folks. We are live, and we are bringing it to you every Friday. This is Brainfood Live on Air, episode 103. We're just trucking on. We had a bit of a break, Easter. I hope you enjoyed the Easter holiday and the just a little bit of a step away from the digital side of things. We all need to do that. That's something I did also. So we're refreshed and ready to go for another long sprint for every Friday doing this show. Listen, just a quick sound check as usual before we start. Everyone on Crowdcast, can you hear me okay? If you can, just give me some kind of sign that you can hear me all right. We've lost one of our channels, so we have lost Periscope, I'm sad to say.
Oh, no.
We were getting like 300-400 views on that. That was not bad. It turned into a decent channel, but that's been killed off. So we're only on LinkedIn Live now. So LinkedIn, if you can hear me okay, please say so. I would really like to see whether that's flying. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or whatever one of those emojis are. And I think we're broadcasting on Facebook as well. The Facebook group should be live. If so, let me know that we're good. Okay, we're starting to get some signals back, which is good stuff. Okay, fantastic. Let's get on with the show. A quick shout out, as always, to our sponsors this week. By the way, this show cannot happen without support from our amazing sponsors. So thank you very much to everyone who's done that, all the businesses who've stepped up, in particular, stepping up for the first time. So today I'm delighted to say we've got a new sponsor for us. Delighted to welcome Stard as our sponsor today. And Stard are basically one of the leading businesses that are dealing with candidate experience, in particular, how to create a survey experience for your candidates and employees in such a way that they enjoy actually giving you that information. So do check out Stard if indeed you are looking for a solution of some type. I'm just going to share the link with them right there. I think you get a free demo or something like that and check them out. It would be very good if you haven't got another solution. Okay, let's get on with it. Adam Gordon, good to see you, sir. Nice haircut as well. I've been looking at my own haircut. I've been cutting it for the last year by myself. I've not got better, haven't improved. So I'm kind of keen to get some professional help at this point. But anyway, how you been? All good?
Yep, all good, thank you. As you know, I was off this morning off work and climbed up a very big hill and then scampered back down as fast as possible in order to get here for Brainfood Live.
I saw that. And by the way, folks, if you didn't know, I was like in a panic earlier today because Adam sent me a picture with him up in the Cairngorm somewhere. And I was like, you're not going to make this back in time for this show. In which case I'm going to have to rope some poor person to step in to do the co-hosting. But anyway, glad to see you back.
Just in case the police are watching, by the way, I was not in the Cairngorms. That is way further than I'm allowed to go right now. So just to clarify, I was definitely not in the Cairngorms.
It was just the hill outside your back garden, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's talk about the newsletter last week. Did you read it? And if so, what was interesting, man?
Yeah. I want to talk about gig economy for a second, and especially with regards to India, because there's been quite a lot of interesting things happening recently in this regard. And as we know, Uber lost a big case in the UK saying that their people are not gig workers and they're employees and they have to pay them national insurance and holidays and things like that. Deliveroo, which IPO'd on the London stock market, shares tanked by a third, like in the first day of trading, because of the same thing. Because there was investors saying, we don't think that their work practice is sustainable. So it's interesting to see. I think it was Boston Consulting Group's kind of report on the potential of the gig economy in India. Now, India is just huge. It's the second biggest country in the world by population as of today, but I think it is only about 4 or 5 years away before it becomes the biggest population in the world, and huge English-speaking population as well, which is of course great for the Anglosphere, American, Australia, UK kind of organizations. And I think that India's I've said it on the Brainfood Facebook group as well. India is the sleeping giant of tech as well. India is going to be leading the world in technology and therefore leading the world in the very near future. And so that was an exciting article. I think that India as a powerhouse is going to be the global powerhouse in 5 years' time.
Yeah, I don't know whether the global powerhouse, but they're definitely going to get there. And they're definitely going to step up for all of the reasons that you mentioned. And by the way, folks, if you do want to take a global perspective on future work and where things are going and stuff like this, I would totally take a look at this report that the Boston Consultancy Group have put together. Very accessible, but it gives you a little bit of an idea that, different sort of cultures, different situations have totally different ideas of what is good or bad. And we're very dominated, I think, by US, UK type of mentality as to, what is the right thing. But oftentimes you need to pay attention to other voices in different parts of the world, and then kind of understand that, in fact, they have a different view, and there's lots of really rational reasons why certain types of employment make more sense there. So take a look at that report. Super interesting. Anybody interested in gig working also need to look at it. Share it in the chat stream. Okay, what else, man?
As you know, I'm really quite passionate about language and the kind of words that you use to try and get people to do things that you want them to do. And I enjoyed BuzzSumo's analysis on the best headlines that get the most attention. And they do point out that a headline doesn't necessarily just mean the intro, the top of an article. It could be a tweet, it could be a video title, it could be an email subject heading, that type of thing. Really great article that explains kind of what you should do if you want more attention. And the first thing is, I think they said convey information succinctly, and the second is make sure it's a call to action, so it tells the person what to do. We don't think enough about language, and working in recruitment, where we're constantly using really small, like soundbite phrases to get people to click the next thing, do what you want them to do, and we don't have the opportunity to influence them on the phone the way we used to, or on Zoom. We have to do it much more online, so we've got to get real expert at doing this.
There's absolutely no doubt. If you're a recruiter and haven't seen that report by BuzzSumo, you need to read it. They basically break down, I think they did 100 million analysis of 100 million headlines on articles to see which ones worked. And you'd be a fool not to take advantage of that data that they've produced. Now, absolutely, it's going to be heading into some ethical problems here, because you're talking about things that are clickbaity, or things that would potentially influence the audience in a certain way. But if you're practically doing things as a recruiter, or you're trying to increase engagement, let's say, on some of your posts, some of these practices are worth bearing in mind. I didn't know, for instance, if you're going to use a number in a headline, the number is 10. That is the one that gets the most opens. So if you're going to create a listicle of some type, try and get 10. So simple rules like this. It's just packed. I mean, you're never going to get through it in one sitting. So do have a read, spend time on it, and you'll pick out one or two things that will improve how your team writes things. Job ads, employer branding type stuff, whatever content that's out there.
Yeah.
Cool. What else, man?
Video about the way that artificial intelligence is. I think the term they described it as was automating racism.
Yep.
But it's really just a reminder for those that don't know, or acknowledgement for those that don't know, that when you use artificial intelligence to assess people, the AI needs to be trained, and the algorithm within that is created by humans. So it may well be that artificial intelligence is accentuating discrimination. And so we just have to be conscious about this.
It not only is accentuating discrimination, but from a technical implementation point of view, it should do. And I use the quote in should because it's not an ethical should, but it's a logical progression on designing AI accurately. In other words, we've designed it with a view that it should just replicate human decision making. And what this, I've shared the video, by the way, it's from Vox, really good 20-minute video. Anybody can watch it, very accessible. But it analyzes essentially what AI is doing is basically learning from human actors that are saying yes, no, maybe on what they're seeing. And they're simply pattern matching from that and expanding it into a rule until ultimately you do get these prejudicial outcomes that are totally inequitable. So automating racism, I think, is a fair description of what we're doing, but it isn't as a result of flawed algorithms. It is a result of the algorithm operating as it is meant to operate. What we need to grasp is the idea that inherently human beings are prejudicial, especially when we have time constraints and we don't have the time to fully process or appreciate all the other factors involved in the human being. So in a recruitment context, as an example, if you're like screening CVs really rapidly, there'll be all kinds of decisions you're making that are almost at the subconscious level that will be full of your learned experience, and that will be full of bias. You may, for instance, start identifying Anglo-Saxon names as better than Islamic names, let's say, due to one incident where, you had a problem with a candidate coming from a certain demographic, and then suddenly that then accelerates. And that's a problem at a human level. But when you put it into an algorithm, and automate it, then you're talking about a systemic thing that's baked in. Huge problem. So we need to basically look at this and think about what we want in terms of extracting out. But it's not flawed algorithms. Algorithm works. It's the flawed human. Okay, one more before we hit to the topic of the show.
Yeah, EMSI, which is an economic modeling. I don't know if they're consultancy or what exactly they do, but they've created an open source library of job titles because they've identified that job titles is a real problem, and it creates chaos. What one person calls themselves, here's a good example: account executive. If you're an account executive in an advertising agency, you're the most junior account handler. If you're an account exec in IBM, you're on about 200K basic salary. And so this is a really great way of trying to understand better what job titles really mean and what job titles you should be using within your organization.
Yeah, and I've just shared it in there. They're basically trying to create a library and a translator, essentially, to say, look, if you're hiring for this person, here's what 5,000 other companies are calling something similar, and is this the right thing? So they're trying to get everyone to agree what the terms mean, which is a problem. Which is obviously a problem. Project manager, what does that mean in one context? Totally different from another. You mentioned, to be honest with you, the US can be very bad at this because they have titles like VPs or everywhere. A VP in an American consultancy might actually be a fairly junior role. Whereas a VP in a European company would be like, you're one of the top people in the business. So it doesn't, basically, we're using the same words, but we mean different things. Yeah. And this thing is an attempt to create a translator for it. So worthy project, worth exploring.
I think the one thing that's really interesting is the way that job titles motivate people to come and join your organization. Yeah. And I'm absolutely sure that's why JP Morgan calls like assistant manager level positions VP, so that they can pay somebody 35 grand in central London, but they can tell all the people down at the pub that they're VP at JP Morgan.
Well, here's the reality of career progression, man, quote unquote career progression. How many jobs might there actually be for a person? Ultimately, you're going to make something, move something, or sell something. There's not much more of jobs out there. There's a combination of those, either one of those three is in the main. And then we layer on all of these different job titles. Basically, what is the motivation half the time is retention and recruitment. So it's a marketing ploy. Where we've created these subdivisions, and part of the problem is this: we're not actually using job titles as a descriptor. We're using it as a marketing tool. So very interesting how we ever tackle this, because I wonder whether it is an accuracy thing or it's inherent about our need to attract talent.
Yeah, I actually saw somebody complaining about job titles on Twitter yesterday. It was Lisa
Scales.
Who works for Nestle, Lisa Scales. And she said, "Did you see this?" She was complaining about an organization that she knows quite well, a technology company, where there's just so many people that she'd hired into that business years ago who now call themselves founder of the business that she founded. And that's pretty disingenuous, but also kind of pointless and just about ego.
It is, and that, again, disputes, right? So anyway, let's sort of draw a line under that. Let's talk about the topic of today: candidate experience, how and when to measure it. I always assume you know nothing about this, Adam. So I do apologize if that's my default scenario. But what do you think? Before we bring our guests on, candidate experience, when do you measure it and how? Those quick answers to that.
At every possible point. You measure it at the point before somebody really knows anything about your organization, right through to the point that they're a year working for you, 2 years, 3 years, every 6 months. Find out, pulse check people. So, of course, recruitment is mostly broken, and I know that that's a cliche, and I'm probably going to get some flack for saying that. But the interview process, onboarding process, all of that is normally terrible, and the thing is, we don't really ask. Most organizations just don't ask. What did you think about this? And what did you think about that? Feedback.
All right.
All the time.
That's all well and good, but at some point that's going to be like prohibitive for the experience itself. Like you're constantly checking on the experience. It's like that, waitress who comes or waiter that comes to your table and bothers you every 5 minutes as you're enjoying your food. It like puts you off what you're doing. So there is a scenario where, how much is too much. Anyway, let's bring on some smarter people than us. They can help us with this conversation. We're going to bring on Steve Usher firstly. Now, Steve, he has been multi-recommended by loads of people on this. So I'm very interested to get Steve's view. And we're going to bring on Anna Vecker as well, who's a candidate experience lead right now for SumUp. So hopefully they will get some input, people who specialize in this space. Folks, if you listen to this candidate experience, I'd be interested to know what you do when it comes down to CX. Is it like one survey at the end of process, or do you somehow measure throughout? And if so, how do you do that? Okay, here we go. Great stuff. Steve Usher actually looks exactly like he does on his bio. Amazing. You too, Steve. Let's go with you first. Introduce yourself. Who are you? What it is you do?
Hello, chaps. Thanks for having me. First and foremost, good to see you both again. It's been a while. So Steve Usher, I'm from the UK, but based in Stockholm. Been living here for 5 years. Background in mainly recruitment and talent acquisition, and recently, or almost 2 years this year, the founder of Five Studio, based in Stockholm. We're an employee experience design agency.
Fantastic.
That's what we do.
And no better place to put a design business than in Scandinavia, right?
I love it.
Those people have got great design.
I just want to add one thing to that, by the way. Experience design is a skill that we don't have nearly enough of within recruitment, and it is probably the most underutilized quality. Companies like Intel make use of it a lot, but almost nobody else does, and it's really vital.
Yeah, we haven't got a clue. Anyway, let's move on to Anna. Anna, who are you? Can you introduce yourself real quick to the crowd?
Sure. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I joined SumUp recently as a candidate experience lead, and I will be focusing on building really great candidate experience culture in the organization. And before that, I worked for more than 5 years in Get Your Guide, and also was building the recruiting operations function from scratch.
That's perfect, because you've also come in as a candidate recently, then, Anna, haven't you? So you can figure out,
exactly.
Okay, this is what needs to be fixed. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Let's talk about this topic. I'm running a poll, by the way. Everyone seems to say, half the people are saying we've measured it at the end of process. That's probably default, isn't it? Like we when a person ends a recruitment, we send them an email saying, "What did you think?" Do you think, firstly, is that now a mandatory step? Even how many companies are actually even doing that, do you think?
Anna?
I would say this should be a mandatory step. At least when we reject candidates, I think it's a very nice way to get into their head and just ask them, what did they think about the process? I think it should be part of the process of every company, to be honest. And there's so many different ways to do it. There's a lot of ATS that offer candidate survey within the ATS already, like Greenhouse, for example. There are some tools like Start, for example. And if you don't have a budget, you can even create Google form and send it out and gather data. But I think that should be a mandatory step.
Yeah. So basically, a Google form is the minimum, right? I mean, essentially, if you're doing any kind of recruitment, you need to have some sort of way where the candidate can give you information on how you did. So basic stuff. Yeah.
You can, yeah, and also what you have to remember is there's certain biases, particularly post accepting a job. Then you're going to get you're undertaking research and you're going to have biases. So if you're just doing it at the end on a successful candidate, you will get a swing in bias, probably more positive sentiment, of course, with some constructive feedback. But I always say kind of you're only as good as your weakest link, and so if you've got weaker links further up the hiring funnel, particularly like post reject is a classic, lack of feedback, then yeah, of course you're going to have a swing in the other way with the bias and much more negative focus as well. So I think just finding that balance across those various listening posts across the entire journey gives you a much more kind of balanced view of more holistically what that candidate is experiencing, regardless of where they are in the funnel.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Because the candidate psychology will change as they progress or not, right? I mean, if no one likes to be rejected, inevitably I would be a little bit annoyed at that. That's a human thing. And if you ask me at that point, what do you think of our experience? You're not good enough for the job. I'm going to be like, fuck you, a little bit like this. Like there'll be a response. So,
the response tongue will typically be pretty, angry, particularly if you're asking for feedback from somebody when they themselves have not received feedback.
Oh, definitely.
And we ran some workshops at the end of last year, and we had a candidate group, and one of the people got really, really angry about it because there was no way I would give feedback. It would deepen their view of that brand negatively, in a negative sentiment. But I think also it's around how you communicate in those moments as a company about when you're asking for that feedback, because I think also asking for feedback should be part of the experience. And sometimes you can kind of be transparent to say, actually, look, we're not doing very well right now. We need you. We know we're not delivering. I mean, to be bold as that, to say we are struggling in certain areas. We really would value your feedback. I think that kind of tone and language, would speak really volumes and capture really great feedback from people. So.
Okay, so two really interesting things that we've already talked, sort of emerging in this conversation. Let's deal with the first one here, which is the transparency that you're talking about. There's going to be people watching this that literally haven't started the journey in terms of designing any kind of experience. And they're trying to, oftentimes you don't have the information to take that first step. So what you're saying is it actually wouldn't be a bad thing to announce that that's the situation and say, hey, we're just starting this and we need your help, rather than like do it privately and try and figure it all out and deploy. So have you any experience of doing any of that? I mean, I speak to both of you here, Steve and Anna, like this very start of putting together an experience. Like how do you talk to the stakeholders to make sure they're on board with it? How do you get it out of the TA HR type of world?
I think it's easier to do when you have a smaller team, right? So you can just sit down, like coordinator, recruiter, you can sit down together and you can just think, okay, what are the aspects of the candidate experience we want to measure, or like simply what do you want to know, right? And then when you think about those things, you can include this in the survey. Like, for example, we want to know how our candidates feel about time we process their application or feedback they received. Just try to think about different touch points of the journey and how can you transform this into the survey. And then create a survey and then just start experimenting and look at the data and what do you receive from this data. And once you have some data already from candidates, then you can create maybe candidate journey, and then you see what are the best touch points, where are you strong, where are you not very strong, and you go from there.
Yeah.
Can I just go back a step before you do any of this? I think it's really important that you create, and hardly any organizations do this, but I think it's really important to do it. Make sure that there's a service level agreement between recruiters and hiring managers, between hiring managers and recruiters, between hiring managers and candidates, and vice versa, and set that out at the beginning. If you set that out at the beginning and explain to a candidate and to the recruiter exactly what's expected of them, then they're much more likely to participate. And if you do your bit, you've generated sufficient goodwill that they'll feel that they should do their bit as well.
Yeah, but it's also really effective when you already have some data from candidates, and when you go back to the hiring manager and you say, hey, this is what we collected and this is where we're doing great and this is where can we improve. And when they see this data, they're like, oh, okay, I never thought about this. This is I will make it a priority to work on.
That's a really interesting point. Like, where's the first conversation? And maybe that's a judgment call for the individual recruiter in that business to just assess the state of your relationship, let's say with the hiring manager team. How receptive are they to your voice? And if the potentially difficult conversations you need to have, then you need to equip yourself with more information to help go ahead and do that. Actually, are there resources out there that focus on candidate experience that are useful to talk about? I mean, let's say I'm starting, I have no clue. It would be great to just drop in some stats to this hiring manager that is like, giving me some resistance. Are there places that we go, or is it just kind of scattered across the internet right now?
I'd say it's quite scattered from what I see. I think it's just very quickly, just because I just share this out to anybody who is considering as well. Just jumping back to Anna's point around designing and thinking about engaging the business, is also think about that's kind of an inside out approach to say these are the things that we're interested in hearing about. These are might be time, response time. It might be quality feedback. That's valid and absolutely from a research point of view, but also sometimes it's good to kind of go the other way and just go straight out to candidates and just keep it really open and let the first round of feedback come in, and then you'll start to identify those things and let that feed your decision making around what you want to measure after, because they provide you with where the hot points are, where you need to be focusing. Sometimes it's a fine balance. Sometimes you have these kind of assumptions or hypothesis yourself to think, okay, this is what I think I want to hear, but actually just sometimes just put that to one side and just put it out there. Keep an open question. The value and the gold is in the text. Always remember that, and let that drive the second phase of your research or third phase as you evolve out from that.
Yeah. That's a good point. The only thing you have to consider, if you have a lot of candidates, just be prepared to go through lots of text, right? So you need to dedicate some time, because when you have this qualitative feedback, right, and you just have text, you need to be prepared to read through it and then categorize it in some sort of report. So that would be a bit stressful, I would say, at the beginning, but it's a good starting point for sure.
Yeah, there are some companies, not many, but there's a couple who just you can literally you can do a whole dump of text analysis and they'll do the sentiment analysis for you, particularly in high volume environments. Just helps churn through that really quickly and produce really kind of solid outcomes for you to base decisions on.
On that note, it's just occurred to me, all this feedback is actually text, isn't it? Like we're very clear that there's only one type of feedback in terms of how the information is formatted. That's the only thing we can process right now. So you would imagine in future.
I think it's like how did you rate this part of the experience? Good, bad, brilliant, whatever. I think it's not just text. I think it's also numbers. It's
all right. So you get multiple choice. Yes, you get some multiple choice. You get some text. What you don't do, or what we can't handle right now, is a video, audio. We can't deal with that. Presumably, phone call. Back in the day, you're like, all right, we take the feedback that way, but it's like you can't do anything with it really.
I think it's pretty cutting edge, but you can use. I mean, you can use voice analysis. Software that will help you. Transcription type service. We'll take that. I mean, something like PhoneIt will do that straight away. That'll PhoneIt. Right. Nick Livingston's business that does that.
You're right. Yeah, there's certain companies but they're niche though. Like they're so
it's cutting edge.
It's they're not widely used at all. I think most of us collect it by like someone's typing in something, and that's the information we have to process. But it's useful to know that's what it is, because. I just wonder again, feedback might be more. The style of collecting feedback will also need to be thought about, because typing into a keyboard is going to certain people are going to be more comfortable doing that than others. You're going to need a computer for a start, right? So if you're dealing with people who are in blue collar work, let's say, mobile phone might be all they have. Typing on this is terrible. So you actually might get a different response rate. Okay. Very interesting. I want to talk about trust a little bit here. How can you trust what the candidate is saying is true? And this is no disrespect to candidates, but maybe not. Maybe they're not giving an accurate view of what actually happened. Maybe we're catching them at a different emotional point, positive or negative. How do we trust what they say?
I would say my response to that's quite simple. It's actually in the numbers. So that's the beauty of like analysis work, particularly of verbatim analysis work. is it's in the vast majority. So it doesn't. If you analyze, say, I don't know, 100 comments, even if one or two are a little bit off or maybe not truthful, enough of the clustering will show you there is a problem somewhere, enough for you to then be trustworthy in the collective feedback of it's not always about the one individual, it's about the collective. So that's kind of where I think my response to that is probably more that I think you can trust it. Again, it's for me, if you ask for feedback, it's how you ask and when you ask. You'll get the response then that I think will minimize that risk. I think the ones that are thought like an afterthought, or when you receive it, it just looks poorly considered or designed, and even when you're answering the questions, I mean, we've all had them. I mean, you start answering these questions, you go, what the hell is this question? It's got nothing to do with what I was just going through because it's been poorly designed. So yeah, I think it's just all about, just the attention to detail on that stuff will draw out the right responses, I think.
Yeah, and what I do is that, so again, I often go through open text feedback, and then if you can really see when it's really emotional, because then you cannot really get anything out of that feedback. Like I read the feedback, but I cannot really do anything. I cannot write down action points because it's like lots of emotions in the feedback. And this is where I'm like, well, I don't really know what to do with this. But if the candidate leaves very specific suggestions or like something very objective, then I'm like, yes, this is a very good quality feedback and I can trust this. And another way, I can always go back to the team and kind of show them the data and say, do you think this is something that could happen in your team? Could you please clarify? Do you maybe possibly know which pipeline this was or which hiring manager this person is talking about? Or so I can double check with the team, and this is how I can trust the data.
Is the feedback anonymized?
Yes.
Yeah. It is, but also depending on whether you're combining it then with more operational data, it is anonymized, of course, but you can then, if you cross your experience data with your operational data, so whatever's in your ATS, it could be function, it could be role type, hiring manager, maybe, you can then, I mean, for the more sophisticated technologies out there, they're able to slice and dice kind of experience data with those kind of hardline operational data. That gives you much richer insights, particularly when you've got a larger estate, larger organizations. So.
We're a bit early to catch the US audience here, which is just a timing issue, but I'd love to know whether there's a difference in terms of our sort of attitudes to privacy on this. I would say in Europe, we probably default to anonymized feedback, but I wonder whether that's the same case in the US, where maybe people are happy to just go with it, in which case you might get a different type of information, or you might get slightly different qualities. Like for instance, you can ID someone who may be just a problem individual, who is a repeat offender, let's say. There's certain people that are always complaining, or you can map that to a manager that may be having difficulty with a particular moment in the process where there's a consistency of feedback where you think, okay, there's a training issue with that person. Because we've had this more than several times, different feedback or the same feedback from different people. Super interesting. And I want to dive into a little bit of your work at SumUp, because it's very interesting that your job is actually candidate experience lead. So we're starting to see this emerge, right? I mean, this role didn't exist 2-3 years ago. Here it is, it's happening. What's the brief there? Why is this job there, and what it is that you're actually doing now that you're doing it?
It's a really cool question, and I think like this role exists a lot in the US, but not so much in Europe. So what I'm doing sometimes, I'm just kind of like stalking some people from the US and adding them on LinkedIn and see what they're doing in terms of like candidate experience and recruiting operations. And I'm really happy that this is developing now in Europe as well. So what I'm doing, so it's a lot of project management actually, and a lot of process optimization. So I'm looking at every touch point we have with the candidate. I'm looking at the whole candidate experience journey, and I'm looking at all the participants of this journey, and I'm trying to understand if they're prepared to deal with candidates, if they know what to do in the process, if they know how to behave, how to interview, and how to schedule. So every touch point we have, I have to take a look and just make sure that we provide really good experience. I work really closely with recruitment coordinators. I actually started as a recruiting coordinator, so this is why I actually developed my career, because as a coordinator, I got so many insights into like what candidates think and what they do and how they behave. And I thought, wow, this is a really cool career because it's not really recruiting, it's more operation, you know,
Yep.
and it's a lot of process optimization, because if you have really good streamlined processes, then you have usually very good experience as well. Like you have to start with your processes, with streamline. And of course the surveys, it's something that's core of my job. So I'm looking at the surveys, I'm launching surveys in SumUp. So and analyzing data, and then thinking, okay, I need to present this data to recruiters, to stakeholders. This is a big part of my job as well.
Okay, two things there, super interesting, Anna. Firstly, process optimization. How much of bad candidate experience is just down to inefficiency, would you say?
At least half of it.
Yeah. So basically, I think that's probably true, isn't it, guys? I mean, essentially, yeah. Well, is it all of it? I mean, some people just don't like. They I don't know. There's one person in my mind. I can't get him out of my mind, but he's like constantly complaining about his experience as a job seeker. You know, I can't get him out of my mind. It's like, okay, whatever happens, you could give this guy like a luxury experience. He's still gonna complain. But yeah, I would say that efficiency is one of the main things, but also. Sometimes people are really jaded by the job experience, right? So, for instance, someone who's an involuntary job seeker who's under a huge amount of pressure and is struggling in other places outside of your experience, right? They're going to come in maybe with a different attitude, very sensitive to any issue, and therefore have a heightened awareness of any kind of thing that they think is not right. Whereas someone who perhaps, has had success in recruitment processes, and generally speaking, they've led to good outcomes to that person, just may naturally have a more positive view of it, even though it may be exactly the same experience. So, but I think you're right. Process optimization has got to be a huge part of this.
I'd like to quickly introduce another element to this, which is called NBA, Next Best Action. This is a concept from customer experience, and it's all about whenever a person does something, that something determines what happens next and what they get next or what the company gets next. And it's all automation. And I really believe that 85-90% of everything we're talking about is about automation. It's about automating the prompt to the individual to do whatever next it is, whether that's the hiring manager or the recruiter or the candidate. And that's why I say 100% of this is about process.
Very interesting. Okay, time is pressing, folks. So I want to move very quickly on. We've got other people to bring on to the show. Before we let Steve and Anna on with the day, what message would you have? Like, why is candidate experience important, let's say? So a head of TAs watching this and they're thinking, oh yeah, we're not going to get a candidate experience lead, or we're not going to get a consultant in to give us, some education. Can you explain to that person, why you think candidate experience is an important thing to do? Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think right now, I think it's the greatest opportunity to stand out in a sea of ordinary by actually using proper experience design methods to design experiences, whether it's specific for engineer groups or whether it's full stack developers or whatever target talent groups there are. So I think there's a side thing around experiences specifically. I think the other thing from a listening perspective is right now, I mean, top of funnel, biggest part of your audience, all the way down to silver medalists and people that join your business. They're a captive audience. And inside of that is just a gold mine of really valuable feedback and insights. So if you just find a way to capture it, turn it into actionable outcomes, or at least to use that data, to Anna's point earlier, to influence internally in the business. It shifts your argument. If you're having a one-to-one, debate or discussion with a hiring manager about why, as a TA professional, why they should be doing X, Y, Z, you remove that conversation, say the candidate's needs, wants, and desires. It's not mine, it's theirs, and therefore this for me holds greater influence in shifting people's minds. So
essentially, it's a great source of market intelligence. It's candidate experience isn't just, we've got a good score, forget about it. It's actually think about getting information that these people from outside of your business are telling you about how you do things. That's actually really important and potentially gives you competitive advantage.
It gives you stories. Yeah, it gives you everything. Yeah.
And yeah, also mileage on that side, right? Like some content maybe you can produce. How about you, Anna? What advice would you give to this head of TA, kind of thinking about, do we dedicate resource to a kind of experienced person? What would you say to that leader?
I think that your company culture should reflect in the recruiting process, because I know there's a lot of great companies and they have amazing culture, but then they kind of fail to reflect this in the recruiting process, and this is why they can potentially lose some really, really great candidates, because candidates also interview you. It's not only you interview them, they interview the company as well. They're assessing everything. They're thinking, do I really want to work with these people? Do I really want to work in the company where the recruiting process is not great? They're assessing you as well. And this is why it's really important to properly set this up so you can reflect your culture. And if you put the culture, your values on the website, and then the candidate goes through the process and it's just a huge discrepancy and they just don't see these values, they will be like, well, I'm not really interested. I don't see that this is the company for me, and the culture is not really reflected. It's just somewhere on the website, and we want to avoid this.
And huge reputational risk, right? So if you've declared very explicitly on your website that you care about this, that, and the other, and you fail to deliver on a candidate experience, or you've consistently failed to do that, then you expose yourself to being, lots of reputational damage there. Okay.
Just quickly add something to that. This is even more important in a company like SumUp. So I'm not at all surprised that Anna's been hired to do this job, because in a company like SumUp, you've got three different challenges. The first is you are a challenger business. So, you're a challenger fintech business. You're not the household name yet. And so you've got to work harder. The second thing is you're in Berlin. You've got to work harder. And the third thing is almost everybody you're hiring is what I would describe as in-demand talent. You've got to work hard. You've got to work hard if you've got hiring software engineers and solutions architects and data scientists.
Yeah. It might actually be a sign, as to, whether you are competing for these highly skilled in-demand people, that you put resources in these places.
Anna's work, quite honestly, could probably be linked to hires. Not immediately, but after about a year, Anna will probably be able to link what she's doing to the speed of hiring good, people into roles, getting jobs filled. The speed of getting shortlists filled, the speed of all those things, and so I think it's very tangible.
Well, let's talk about how we integrate the candidate experience function back into things like employee performance and stuff like this. Definitely something we need to have a chat about. But anyway, we're going to say goodbye to Steve and Anna at this point. So thank you very much, you two, for joining us on the show. Fascinating getting your input. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
It was really fun.
Take care.
Cool. Bye.
Cool, eh? Really interesting people. And I love the specialized nature of what they do. I think we can learn a lot from them. The reason why I want to move on, though, real quick, is simply we've got non-specialists to come onto the show. In other words, TA folks that are still in TA. And I'm interested to get practitioner experience of it. So we're going to bring on two very senior recruiters, actually heads of global recruitment TA teams, see where their horizons are when it comes down to, and there they are. There's Jamie Edmonds, long time no see, and Manjuri Sina. Jamie, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. So I support talent at Deliveroo. Deliveroo is an online food company, and our teams look after all employee recruitment across 12 countries now, including the employee lifecycle. So onboarding through to offboarding and alumni. And I've been at Deliveroo for 2 years, which in Deliveroo terms is quite old and entitles me to say things like, back in my day, we were doing X, Y, Z. And then my background before Deliveroo started in web and user experience design, studied computer science. Halfway through that, co-founded a cloud-based customer service software startup called Kako, where my job was looking after essentially customer experience and product strategy, and then later on employee experience as well, which was really cool because I got to think about two sides of the same coin, so to speak. I'm really focusing on scaling experiences and excited to join you guys today.
I love that cross-fertilization from different industries and whatnot. I think it's just vital. So great to have you with us, Jamie. Thank you. How about you, Manjuri? For the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Super excited to be here. Thanks, Hong, for the invite. And yeah, I'm Manjuri, based in Berlin at the moment, of course, like everyone else, working from home right now. And I head talent acquisition for technology for OLX Group, which is one of the biggest classifieds platforms in the world. Previous to this, I was working with Zalando for close to 5 years. Again, a similar portfolio of taking care of build-up of technology teams. And before that was with Accenture. So all throughout, been with companies that have been very, very interested in experience, be it employee experience or candidate experience. And have dabbled with... and I think to the point that Anna and Adam were talking about, yes, hires and the number of hires and whether you can boost your hires is also can be directly related to your candidate experience NPS scores. And I'm happy to share how as well. So thanks for the invite.
Well, you can't say that and not talk about it. So let's dive straight into it. So how does that happen and when does it happen? Because I think Adam made the point, which is valid. You might implement something, but when do you know that is actually working? So kick off with your example on this real quick, Manjuri.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a bigger talk, and I'm happy to search the link and share it. So there was a conference in Stockholm about I think in 2018, and that's where I shared the case study. This was our huge ramp up back in the Zalando days in 2018, and we were to hire 1,000 engineers in 1 year. And we were looking at how can we increase the number of offers accepted from Q1 to Q3 and Q4 and really push it up. There were other aspects to the quadrant, of course, but one of the key things that came to surface was candidate experience. We were using Qualtrics as the tool, and our in-house sourcing team, led by Magdalena, used to actually work on designing the questions. We also have Chris Raw in the audience here. He was our candidate experience lead. So we ran workshops with the team, with tech TA team, actually designed, had a design workshop, looked at the moments that mattered, where do we need to collect information. So throughout that last year of 2017, collecting that information also kind of led us to understand how to look and read this information. So we realized the moments that mattered for people, the time taken in the interviewing stage, the coding step, the code live interview that might take a lot of time, the code check that was taking a lot of time. So we tweaked based on their feedback, and all through the process, the whole case study, all through the process, we were able to increase our offer acceptance rate or number of offers that were accepted by 30% from Q1 to Q4. And the candidate NPS score was a major indicator here, because we could, what it told us was interviewing. So we could again go back to training interviewers. It also enabled us to understand that we need to train interviewers on unconscious bias. Also looking into our feedback process. That's where we had to do some workshops with the entire TA team on the feedback process, because we got a lot of response saying that the feedback, either we don't receive appropriate feedback or the feedback doesn't help us grow. So that's where...
This is feedback to candidates, right? Just to clarify.
Exactly. Yeah, yep. Absolutely. So these are the things that enabled, and you mentioned NBA. I like that word, Adam, when you said next best action. So the scores led us to kind of understand, okay, what should be our next best action, and also put in SLAs. People talked about the hiring process being very slow or very long drawn out. So then we looked at the SLAs of, okay, applications coming in, they should be cleaned up in maximum 2 working days, and actually had a live dashboard in our room there with the running ticker of where are the application stocks. So yes, it can definitely lead you to increase your number of hires as well, for sure.
Okay, so you need to dig out that talk and send it to us, because it sounds like something we should all read. Okay, go to you, Jamie. Some really interesting examples there. Can you kind of come up with an example also in your experience, whether you've observed it or been involved in it somehow, where the needle has definitely moved? You can like point to it and say, you know what, this we did, and then here was the outcome.
Sure. Bit of context first. So I think Deliveroo is pretty early on in its journey in terms of taking a design perspective from candidate experience and also putting instrumentation to it to measure it. We've been able to benefit from a pretty strong consumer brand in our sort of biggest hiring markets, which we've caused us to rest on our laurels a little bit, but we're making up for lost time now. I thought Manjari's story was great, and we've seen sort of similar benefits by making investments, creating processes, and automating parts of that journey to make sure that MBA, and I love that, happens more often than not. And I agree with Adam that it almost all comes down to process, to make sure the best right thing, the most right thing is happening more often for the right candidate. One of to your question, I think one of the things that's been really effective for us at Deliveroo has been shifting company behavior, shifting hiring manager behavior, shifting interviewer behavior. And we've been trying to do that by making the whole business accountable for candidate experience and the hiring experience. And one of the highest leverage things I think we've been able to do, at least that I've sort of seen in my time here, is by incorporating accountability for hiring and the hiring experience and candidate experience into our levels, expectations, and progression framework, and therefore performance reviews. So there's a whole element of our progression framework called company contribution, which speaks to having activities and making an impact on things like how inclusive the company is, diversity initiatives, hiring, helping us hire better, hire well, and deliver a really great candidate experience. And that's a key part, therefore, of our expectations of people if they're looking to progress to the next level, and also in our assessments of each other in our performance reviews. And that accountability has really helped move the needle, and has caused people, I think, to pay more attention, invest more time in things like interview training, being really engaged in what that experience looks like from a hiring manager perspective, rather than, sort of delegating it to the recruitment team to sort of sort out and be responsible for. And it's also sort of spurred more cross-functional initiatives. So we are naturally better able to partner with our comms team and our marketing team to create things and build things which is going to have a positive impact on employer brand and candidate experience. So yeah, that would be my example.
This is fascinating. I love any example where it's like getting stuff out of TA and into the business, because there's only so much we can do in our little microcosm to affect the wider problem. Was that situation there before you arrived at Deliveroo, Jamie, or did you see it? Did you observe the journey of it as it was happening?
When I came in, we were a mixed bag. I think the further away you got from Deliveroo HQ and Deliveroo sort of tech, where we benefited from, I think we were further along sort of the maturity curve of that TA partnership there, the sort of worse it got. So in our more nascent markets, where Deliveroo was in its sort of hyper growth stage and we were opening up everywhere, processes weren't necessarily followed, processes weren't consistent. We ended up with a bit of a mixed bag, and we spent the last sort of 2 years really sort of setting a global standard for what we think a great hiring experience looks like, and building all of the requisite bits and pieces, systems, processes, awareness, training, and so on to make that happen. Today, I think we have a pretty good sort of partnership culture between TA and the rest of the business. It could still be better in elements, and I think we could do a better job at sort of inculcating that culture into managers who come in from companies who haven't, benefited from working at a company like that. Yeah. But I think we're now doing the basic things pretty well, and bad things aren't happening, and we can only go up from there.
Jamie, you've just given me an idea, and I don't know whether you do this or whether anybody else does it, but hiring managers coming in from completely different organizations are all going to have very, very different experiences and expectations on what TA is. I wonder whether there's a need for a TA induction for anybody that's coming in as a manager. And within their first couple of weeks, one of the things that happens is they get a 30-minute induction, which is, this is what you can expect of TA, this is how we'll work with you, but this is what we expect from you as well, and it might be different to what you've had in the past. I've never heard of anybody doing that, but I think it would be a good thing to do.
I think that is a brilliant idea. And I mean, it's to your point, we've had managers come into the business, I'm not going to name names. Some of them, particularly people who come from companies that do this well, big tech, it's fine. They're bought in. They understand how it works. They understand what the value add is.
Yeah.
People who might come in from really big, old FMCG
Banks.
type companies,
All right.
occasionally banks. It's kind of like, when can you send me my CVs? I've got this role to open.
Man, Julie got a massive smile on the face.
So we need to jump on that and nip that in the bud. And one of the things we're doing, actually, to your point, Adam, is we've shifted our branding of what it was our interview training program, and we're calling it Hiring Fundamentals Training. And before, we used to just talk about how do you deliver a good experience in the room, how do you interview well, articulating, giving feedback, and so on. But we've doubled the length of it. And the first sort of 30, 45 minutes is explaining what is hiring, what is talent acquisition, what's the role our teams can play in that, what's your role in it, who has accountability and responsibility, to really sort of set that context. I'd love if people could get that in their first sort of week at Deliveroo.
I can just say you've just done an amazing branding job there, Jamie, because think about this, folks. Hiring Fundamentals as a training title for your hiring managers compared to interview training. You tell me which one lands better for that hiring manager. It immediately just levels it up in terms of how important it might be and what it could do for that hiring manager's sort of own career development and whatnot. So we've got to do a little bit of a reworking of some of the old terms that we're using when we're trying to improve standards across the business. Excellent. Okay, I was about to say something really important, but I've forgotten it, so it wasn't that important. It was about...
Or it was a lie.
It was possibly a lie. I do that upon occasion. No, it was the idea of like linking the candidate experience to your career progression, right? So everyone in Deliveroo has a concern for this. So everyone in any business of this type, one of the ways to get it out of the business is actually, it's you're going to be judged on this dimension of how you have basically contributed to increasing the candidate experience of new people coming in. How did you sell that? I mean, how was that sold? Because that's like a very big step in my view. TA may not have often the status in order to negotiate to have that rolled out across the business. Thoughts on this?
I'm definitely not going to come in and take credit for it. We have benefited from the right kind of company culture that has made advocating for things like that and taking positive steps towards linking rewards and progression to the kind of behaviors that we want to see at the company. So we're starting from like a really good foundation that made it easier to do that. But I think we're also lucky that our leaders get the idea that outcomes are largely driven by our behaviors, right? The business is at the end of the day, the sum or greater than the sum of its people. And if we aren't all aligned on what the right kind of behaviors are, then we're not going to get the right kind of outcomes, whether that is in hiring and talent acquisition and what that partnership looks like, or diversity initiatives, which is often one that in some companies can be kind of like delegated to the head of diversity, and it's kind of their job to fix diversity for the rest of us. But we're just really careful to make it clear that actually it's everyone's job. And in fact, it's probably more a manager's job in the business than it is anyone else's. We're here to provide expertise and support and the operations to help you do that really well. But at the end of the day, it's your accountability. And we were fortunate that it was easy to get buy-in for that.
It's got to all chunk up to values, doesn't it? Everything should link to that, really.
I think sometimes it also helps to give a wake-up call. So to your point there, I think, Jamie, it is, it's fortunate when the organization culture also supports that. But when you have an organization that maybe has not seen candidate experience being collected, when you start that journey, sometimes you need to give a wake-up call. And it could be through sharing the comments. We were discussing, I think we heard Anna also sharing this earlier, that some comments can be really, really jarring. And in a safe environment, if you are in a set of hiring managers or just that particular hiring manager, you share the comment coming from 5 anonymous candidates, if there's a pattern, and this says, this is how I was treated in the interview. That is a wake-up call. And I've seen that sometimes after those conversations, then those hiring managers, I want to see the score. Did it change? Did it go up? Are they now feeling better, and so on and so forth? I think that's one. And second is positive reinforcement. We can use this, for example, the tool that we use in OLX Talent Hub, it also kind of enables you to do hiring manager surveys, recruiter surveys, and candidate experience surveys. It covers all the three areas. So if we can somehow go to a point where we collate this and show a bigger picture, because in the end, if your recruiter is happy, they will keep them happy, and vice versa, right? So there's a positive reinforcement angle. There's definitely fortunate if the culture is like that. And then there's wake-up calls that are needed sometimes to be shared with the business.
I love that wake-up call. And I think that sort of, it speaks to the importance of always combining the qualitative with the quantitative. Because to most hiring managers in the business, candidate NPS or whatever measure of experience you're measuring might not mean a whole lot to their day-to-day. But a terrible comment on Glassdoor that speaks about how the candidate felt and how much effort they put into the process, how let down they felt, and reminding us, and I guess this will go for you folks at OLX as well, as a consumer-facing company, these are our customers.
Yes.
And they're going to take this away, and not only does it have a bad business outcome through a TA lens, it's going to have a bad business outcome from a customer lens.
Do you think that actually the nature of the business, do you think that elevates the importance of candidate experience internally? So Deliveroo, OLX, you're dealing directly with the business. Is there a case to be made to say, look, the reason why these folks care about it more is because they're more sensitive to the fact they're dealing with this mass market compared to some infrastructural business that, you know, is it never touches any customer. Maybe they don't have the customer facing culture mindset or whatnot. Do you think there's anything in that, or is that a bit of a stereotype from me?
No, I would lean on saying that it's a candidate market all through and through. So I don't think, as a candidate, and if I think about my bad experiences that I've had, even some companies have gone wrong with their executive hiring processes, right? Without reaching out, without et cetera, et cetera. So if I, as a candidate, think about it, maybe, you know, those companies were not high-end tech, et cetera, blah, blah. But as a candidate, when you are in that shoe, it's like a guest that you invite to your home, right? If you don't treat that guest correctly, he or she will have a bad experience. That is the bottom line. It's a human-to-human interaction. We may call it conversion funnels and pipelines and whatever we want. It's a human-to-human interaction. And if we go wrong with that, you're hurting feelings. There are emotions involved. There are things bigger than just a job that is involved to this. So for sure, I wouldn't say that the experience bit is only for certain organizations. It would be the same for all.
I would answer that I think if you're in the market hiring in-demand talent, you need to work harder. So PwC is not a consumer brand, but if they're trying to hire financial services tax managers, and so is KPMG, EY, and Deloitte, you've got to make sure that your candidate experience is, pristine.
Totally agree. I agree with everything you said there, Manjari. And I think I do get a sense, this is purely my intuition, that at Deliveroo for sure, and based on some folks I speak with who are part of consumer-facing companies, it comes down to, I think, how many layers of abstraction there are between the sort of manager and the end customer, whether that's your candidate or your ultimate customer, which really drives that culture and how easy it is to get buy-in for investing in this sort of stuff. Less so about the industry, it's more about the company culture and how close they are naturally and culturally, and how much importance the business places on being close to the customer. They are kind of like as a default.
I think that if you're in a consumer-facing business, however, it may well be that actually it is more natural and you get more buy-in quickly within TA to really be focused on candidate experience, because you've got big teams of people that are completely focused on customer experience and UX on websites and things like that. So it may well be that actually the culture is more immediately accepting to this being a priority.
A couple of rapid fire questions for you too. And also you, Adam, if you want to pipe in on this. Do you vary the customer experience design candidate experience design according to the job function or the job roles that you're hiring for? Or is it a universal, this is our way, UX, this is the delivery experience if you're a candidate? Or is it different, for instance, for an engineer or versus a salesperson or versus somebody else? Thoughts on this? Is there a right policy? How do you do it?
It does differ, as in the values shouldn't, the culture shouldn't, to give a short answer. But yeah, the touch points will differ for sure, Hong. So the design that I would do for a data science role would not be the same for a car inspector. So that differs. It also differs slightly from country to country. A country where you have super volume hiring, maybe from India, if I take that example, vis-a-vis to a country like Berlin, it would differ. So yes, there are differences. However, the culture and the values that we want to reiterate should not change.
I can add to this something really practical, a real tangible example. SAP does not take HR business partners that it wants to hire to Cirque du Soleil. It takes robotics engineers to Cirque du Soleil.
I'm not sure I get that reference, man.
As part of the engaging them process. As part of the nurturing them process.
Adam just dropping in random.
Adam's playing 4D chess.
They take them to
5D chess. I'm way behind.
SAP takes data scientists and especially female software engineers and people like that. They take them to Cirque du Soleil. They take them to the Grand Prix. They take them to the darts. They don't take HR business partners or marketing execs or finance managers.
Do you know what? This is starting probably another Brain Food Live topic we should talk about. Like, when should you vary your experience, and what are the ethics behind it also? Because you can imagine some people, like, this sounds like a rewards type scenario that you mentioned there, but other people might think of various bits of experience to think, oh, maybe that's a signal of reward. Why is there more for this person than the other? So that could be a very interesting thing to explore. Let's talk about survey design. We're running out of time. So I want to just get straight down to this core component, designing a survey. There's a person asked actually in the online group on Brain Food today about how do I do that? He doesn't know how to design a survey. He wants to collect candidate experience. He's got no clue how to do it. Is there a good practice to design a good candidate survey, and what a candidate experience survey, and what is that?
Super quick, I think. So there is a certain, this was my dilemma when I joined OLX, because we had Greenhouse, we still have Greenhouse, and they had a set of 8 questions which you couldn't change at that point of time. And I was scouting the market. Qualtrics was too expensive as a tool. And that's when I came across Talent Hub, and they supported in co-creating and designing. The questions are customizable. So it also, you can also do a 3-month survey and see what really matters for you as an organization, to Steve's point earlier, and then you can finalize your questions with them. So this is really helpful. You can also choose the touch points to collect experiences from your job page, from the process, from the feedback, interviewing, etc., etc. So there are certain tools. I'm sure there are more tools in the market similar to that that help you co-create. You don't have that expertise in the organization.
Cool. How about you, Jamie? What's your thoughts on designing surveys? And you mentioned tooling. What kind of tooling is good?
Yeah, there's a delicate science to designing the right survey, asking the right question for the right sort of context and time, and it's worth reading up on before sort of putting together, any old strongly agree, disagree, score out of 11 and so on type survey, because you can create something beautiful with metrics and surveys, but you can also create a bloody mess and cause distraction and confusion. And I think Beamery, Starred, Lever, their blogs and their ebooks, they're pretty good on how do you get started with this? How do you frame up that question? What do you sort of do with the metrics and data off the back of it? At Deliveroo, we started with what we knew what we knew was bad and we needed to fix, and we wanted to understand whether our initiatives were actually making improvements in the things that were bad, such as candidate experience, conversion rate through our career site, and so on. And we started there, and we researched what was the best sort of instrumentation and measurements technique to measure how we were doing on that aspect of the candidate journey. And then separately, and I'd advocate for this if you've got the resources, we have a separate initiative to try and measure everything. And so our goal at Deliveroo is we want to dissect the whole employee experience, and candidate experience being part of that. And if it moves, try to measure it in a way that doesn't impair the actual experience. Because we also want to make sure we are understanding what we don't know yet. We know when we don't get back to candidates quickly, that's not a good experience. It drives poor outcomes. But we also want to learn whether, this interview technique is driving worse experience outcomes for candidates who fit within this certain demographic. And we'll only be able to tap into that kind of insight and get those answers if we're measuring most things. But again, if you have to pick and choose, I'd say start with what you know is bad and you want to improve, so you can measure whether your investments are actually getting a return. And then if you can, try to measure everything if it moves, because future you will thank you for it.
That's excellent. The more I speak to experts like you two and Anna and Steve earlier, it's clear that candidate experience feels like a narrow topic, something that you could box off, quote unquote. But actually, it just goes deeper and deeper. And there's loads more psychology you need to think about. Steve just mentioned their survey design as an art form. I think that's absolutely correct. What kind of data you're collecting back. I remember the last survey I did, it actually put me off from doing surveys because the responses I got back were so overwhelming in terms of the textual information. I couldn't process it. Thank you to the people who actually filled it in. They committed time, but I totally underestimated the amount of time it took me to process what they actually contributed. I wasn't able to reciprocate. So there is a science behind it, and I'd love to see people surface up some, as you mentioned, some of the vendors are producing great blogs. Our sponsor today, I think, have come out some great content as well, star.com, so make sure you check them out. It would be useful to collect all that stuff together somewhere, Adam,
I was just going to add one thing. I think you said it a couple of times about candidate experience being quite a niche aspect of recruitment or whatever. I think it's the canvas for everything. I think it's the canvas for everything we do in recruitment should be based on what's the candidate experience we want to be delivering. And there's nothing really from attraction through to assessment through to onboarding that should not be sitting on a platform, which is the candidate experience.
You know what? There's one more thing I need to. It's going to be out of context, so I should have asked this really early on.
Cirque du Soleil again.
No. That segue we have to explore some of the time, man. No idea where this whistled in from. Remote experience. So the shift to remote. How has that impacted candidate experience? Has it made it more difficult to differentiate your candidate experience compared to previously? When you had a wonderful office, for instance, you can go and show all of your candidates this, that, and the other. Can't do that anymore. Everyone's just looking through Zoom. Have we kind of somehow accidentally standardized the general experience job candidates have and kind of made it difficult for companies to differentiate? Thoughts on this? Manjuri first.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't take them for a 2-day wooing session, right? Even if you're hiring whatever level, even for execs, you can't really call them and say, hey, bring your spouse over, bring the kids over, we'll show you the city, take you around. Not happening. So it has to come back to the process, the efficiency, the automation, the experience that we can give through that automation, and the experience through that one interview, the 2 interview, the time taken, the wording of the comments and feedback. I think, as you said correctly, accidentally we've been pushed to standardize this all across during the pandemic. Of course, there are some care touch points that can be enhanced. That is the recruiter prep or the candidate experience specialist, or you call it a coordinator, that prep that goes in. Can you prep your candidates better? Can you give them that comfort level? We conducted a video interviewing training right when everything switched to remote to kind of sensitize all interviewers, saying that, hey, you might see a background. You might have people walking behind them. You might have somebody who's taking care of an elder at home, maybe also needing 5 minutes during an interview. Do not judge them on that basis, and so on and so forth. So I think that care, if you can drive that care in, that is the differentiator. But of course, the flying you across to this country and that country and all that is something that you can't do at the moment.
It's been a big equalizer. Maybe that helps, the little guy a little bit better. So, which is a good thing. Final word to you, Jamie. Thoughts on this shift to remote? What are the major impacts that on candidate experience generally, and how persistent are some of those things, do you think, going forward?
It's terrifying, because we can no longer rely on inviting candidates over to like our nice offices, give them the tour, check out all the facilities, the great coffee and so on. I think it's required us to be a lot more creative about how we can translate whatever is great about that in-person experience into something that's online and more remote. So we're experimenting with things like trying to incorporate our product into the experience more. So rather than having lunch in the cafeteria with teammates or with someone from the business while you're on site, we offer our candidates some credits to kind of do the same, maybe have like a live coffee or a live lunch with hiring managers or people from the team they might be joining. And we're also trying to think about how we can best leverage swag, which historically I've been kind of allergic to because it tends to be a bit of a spray and pray kind of approach to candidate experience. But actually, I think those meaningful offline moments, if you can get it to a candidate physically, can have a significant impact in a world where, to your point, most people are interacting with companies and people through Zoom.
Yeah, and by the way, folks, it's not just candidate experience, it's also employee experience, because if we're all like literally doing our work from home, there is going to be a differentiation challenge between who the hell it is you work for. You might wake up one day and forget who the hell your employer is, because all you're doing is the same stuff. So, okay, listen.
Just a different Zoom link.
Yeah, we're running. Maybe you could do parallel two employers, right? You forget logging into the wrong call. That's going to happen. Guarantee you. There's going to be someone who's going to take two jobs and do them simultaneously.
That's
okay.
a really, really specific question. It's just occurred to me. How do you, when you're doing this offline, how do you? I mean, if I'm getting interviewed by a hiring manager who doesn't put their camera on, when I've got my camera on, when I'm getting interviewed, I'm going to think this is really weird and it's not going to be a good experience. How do you encourage people to turn their cameras on? Because presumably that's like the first thing they have to do, really.
It's a non-negotiable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a non-negotiable.
It's highly creepy, Adam, right? if you have the hiring managers on switch off, and yeah.
I think so, but that said, some people feel very uncomfortable about doing it. I've been on lots of meetings in the last year. Probably 1 in 4 meetings I've been on, I've had my camera on and the other person hasn't, and I don't really care. But I do find it's a little bit strange.
It's more than strange because it's not reciprocal. I think that you have to agree it to begin with. If there's a hiring manager or a candidate even that really doesn't want to do this, it's debatable whether that's actually a significant factor in their future job performance. For instance, if they are expected to be using this tool, it's almost like saying, I don't want to email people. Okay, well, maybe that's a component of the job that you've got to really deal with. So I think it's relevant. But all these types of things might come into training your interviewers and hiring managers about, like the background, the lighting, the audio, all those things impact the experience when you're interviewing. Probably we have underestimated the importance of that. There's some really good research, actually. I forget what it was, but there was just audio quality actually has a huge impact on the receptiveness of the other person taking the information. It's like they don't care about what's said; they care about the quality of the sound. So incredible stuff that we need to probably dive deeper in this remote setting. Anyway, listen, we could talk forever on this. We're well over time, so thank you very much for joining us, Jamie and Manjuri. Let me let you get on with the rest of your day. Have a good weekend, you two. Great insight, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye. So
such smart people. There's value in speaking to smart people, Adam. Remember that. Especially when we're talking, we need to get smart people to really elevate the conversation there. Okay, that's about it, folks. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you've enjoyed it. I think we've learned a lot about candidate experience. We could learn a huge amount more. I would urge you to check out certain blogs that are out there. I think it was Steve or maybe Jamie who mentioned there was a number of companies that were producing really good stuff. Go and check it out. I think it's really important. There's also a link in the Lada. I'll share that with the guy who everyone's subscribed to here. Candidate experience is one of the pages in there, so that will always be updated with new stuff. Go and check that out. And don't forget our sponsors today, folks, Stard.com. They produce some really good content also. And they've got, I think, probably one of the best surveys I've seen on this, where they've talked about how candidate, when you measure candidate experience, does vary over time. I thought that was really compelling. And it gives you additional insight as to how to design this experience, stuff that all of the panelists were talking about today. Anyway, that's about it. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week. I think we're talking about RPOs, folks. So if you care about how to work with recruitment process outsourcers, you should sign up to that, because we've got a load of really interesting companies. We've got IKEA coming on. They've just agreed an outsourcing deal. They're going to talk us through how they went through that process. We've got other people who are also from the outsourcing community to how to work with on the customer side. And we've got all kinds of interesting data to share. So if you are at the enterprise level, or are you looking for third-party support on a scale-up, you want to check this out. So sign up and follow the channel. Okay, that's about it. We'll see you next week, folks. All right, Adam, that's it. End of show. Thank you so much for hanging on. I know it's like a bit over time, but I'll let you go. Have a good weekend, mate.
See you later.
And by the way, take care on the mountain. Take care on the mountain, right?
Thanks.
See you in 2 weeks.
I'm disappointed I'm missing next week's, because I really love RPOs, actually. I've got several RPO customers, and I think that they are real hotbeds for innovation, because you've got that cluster effect where people are, there, and they're all challenging each other, and innovation happens. So
I think it's a fascinating marketplace, particularly how the RPO model has actually moved from enterprise. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, let's say, only a big bank would ever think about using an RPO. But now it's like you scale up, or you're doing anything, RPO out of the box, that's starting to happen. So yeah, it's a big deal. Dial in from the mountain, man. Get a satellite connector or something.
All right. See you later.
All right. See you later.